Hi, welcome to Behind the Badge. I'm Chief Alan Rodbell of the Scottsdale Police Department. With me is Chris, but not so fast, I haven't introduced you yet.
Hi.
I'm Chris, I am. This is Chris Vassallo, our Community Liaison.
Hi,
Chris.
Chief.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
It is June already.
I know, but we've had some beautiful weather in May. We've been very lucky, some rain, and it's been nice.
Yeah, so I'm building a house, so the rain hasn't been exactly
well, that's
welcome.
not good for you,
yeah,
but
exactly.
good for my flowers.
So anyway, we've as we enter June and we enter school's over, kids are out. We just want to do a gentle reminder to folks that please pay attention. Kids in the street on their bicycles and skateboards, and even walking and playing ball, and of course around the pools. We've already had some horrific tragedies around pools in the valley this year already, and so pools are always an issue here because they're it's always sort of open. But please be careful during these months because kids they think it's okay to get in the pool these months, and they still need to be supervised.
Make sure the gate's locked and that it's secure.
Right, and then we talk about hot cars. The interior of cars in this heat can increase pretty quickly and can be very deadly to pets and to children and to anybody really sitting in a car with the windows rolled up. So please be aware of that. Don't take those risks. I know it's a quick run into the store, but please make sure you take your kids and your pets when it's appropriate with you.
Absolutely, because it is going to get warm up. If you just ever leave a bottle of water in your car and you come back, you see how hot that is. Could you imagine, a human or a pet? So be careful with that. Be cognizant of that.
Yeah. So we've got a really interesting program today because I'm really proud of this. It's a program of something that the Scottsdale Police Department has taken sort of a leadership role recently in developing a program. But quite frankly, we've been in this business for a long time, long before I came to Scottsdale. One of our units in Scottsdale is celebrating their 40th anniversary, and when they were
which is unheard of in policing world.
And when we talk about this particular program in a moment, you're going to find out that for the city of Scottsdale to be thinking about this in the 70s and putting it in a police department was really pretty amazing.
It was.
So the citizens can be really proud of the history of one of our units that we'll be talking about.
Right.
So we've got 3 guests today. Thank you all for being with us.
Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. We're really excited to hear about this program. Lieutenant Army, I'm going to let you sort of introduce the other guests and let the other guests talk to us briefly about who you are and what units you represent. And then we're going to talk about this program that's called the CIT, which stands for the Crisis Intervention Team.
Right.
Very good.
Lieutenant Marmy.
I'm Lieutenant Larry Marmy, and I am a watch commander in the north part of the city, and I supervise a group of patrol officers and patrol sergeants as they go about their daily business of answering 911 calls and other calls for service. So that's what I do, in addition to a lot of...
And how long have you been on LT?
I just crossed my 20 years last week. So my 21st year. Thank you.
You've been a member of a number of interesting units within the police department. I think it's important for our citizens to know that you just didn't arrive into this position. You've done some other things before this. So what other units have you been assigned to?
Sure. I have been a member of the SWAT team. I have been a negotiator on the SWAT team. I've been assigned to internal affairs in the Office of the Chief. I had the pleasure of working at our statewide training academy as a training sergeant, training new officers from all over the state. And then I've just been promoted to lieutenant about 8 or 9 months ago now.
And you also had the school resource officers,
I did.
Correct? As a sergeant?
That's exactly right. I had the school resource officers for a number of years.
And one of our commanders right now is presently at the FBI National Academy back in Quantico. We're getting some leadership training, and while he's away, Lieutenant Marmy is the acting commander.
District commander of the Foothills District.
Which is District 4, which is located at DC Ranch.
DC Ranch area.
I knew the answer. I'm leading the witness. Thank you, sir. Why don't you introduce our guests, please?
Sure. This is Officer Dan Antrim. Dan is a member of our K-9 unit, and he is also one of our lead instructors of our crisis intervention team and our crisis intervention training that we're going to talk about. That's why he's here, but he's currently assigned to the K-9 unit. And then next to Dan is Natalie Summit, who is a longtime member of our Police Crisis Intervention Service, and she is also one of the leads of our Crisis Intervention Team.
And we call that team now the PCIS, is what the language we use, but that's the unit I was talking about that's celebrating their 40th anniversary. And to have crisis intervention specialists signed to police departments is really very unique, and to have done it back in the 70s is really cool. I mean, it really speaks to where Scottsdale has always been reaching out to make sure they provide great customer service to their citizens. And so congratulations, you look great, but I know you haven't been here all 40 years. Yeah, congratulations, we're so proud of our unit, and I know it's instrumental in this whole program that we have crisis counselors on board. So welcome. And Dan, you've done more than just the current assignment as K-9, because I know you were an SRO, and what other units were you in?
Yes, sir, SRO and patrol were for my daily jobs. I'm also a negotiator on SWAT.
Okay. Now I use the term SRO. We do use terms at once.
Yeah,
So new
sorry,
viewers.
school resource officers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
I
you.
think it's important to know that before Dan became a police officer, he was a commander in the United States Navy and is a veteran of war. So he comes to us with a lot of leadership abilities and a skill set before being an officer.
That's great.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for your service.
Thank you, sir.
How long have you been on, Dan? I'm sorry.
10 years last week.
Congrats.
Thank you.
And
So-
Natalie.
Well, we're
Are
going to
you
ask
done
Natalie
with
how long
Dan?
she's been on.
Yeah, we
All
want
right,
to ask
Natalie, how long
Natalie
you been
what
on, Natalie?
she's been doing in her
16
degree.
plus.
You've been on 16 years, and some of your background, Natalie. What do you, besides being in the Crisis Intervention Center, I know you have a lot of degrees and other things in social work.
That's sweet. I actually have my hands in a few different things. I'm the coordinator for our First Responder Smart Card program, which is a program that is unique to Scottsdale that registers a home if they have a special needs person that resides in that home, and that's a very good program. I'm also with Dan on the SWAT team, not as a tactical person, but I'm a mental health professional. And that's important because it's nice to have that mental health input when people are negotiating with folks, and generally they're having a really bad day and they need some assistance, so that's helpful. And Scottsdale's unique in that we have those two mental health people. And then we have a Scottsdale PD CIT program that's been in place since 2005, and I've had the privilege of being involved with that ever since its conception. And then I'm also serving with the East Valley CIT collaboration, which includes Scottsdale, Gilbert, Chandler, and Mesa.
That's great.
Well, let's talk about this recent change up or evolution, I guess, of services and the way we do business. Just to give our viewers a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about crisis intervention. So who would like to talk about that?
Well, let's talk about what CIT is first and kind of a little bit of history of it. First of all, when we go to the police academy, we get a little bit of information about dealing with people with mental illness and things. I look at it kind of like a high school education. This is more of a baccalaureate, almost a master's level. It's a 40-hour course officers go through to learn how to deal effectively with people with mental health issues. So it's not making you a doctor by any means. You're not making diagnoses, but you're able to recognize and see something's going on with this person. And then not only be able to deal effectively using communication skills and learn how to most effectively communicate, but also what do we do next? Sometimes there may be a crime involved. It might involve going to jail, but if not, maybe we could do something different, find a place, a location, a service in the city or the state for them rather than having to go to jail. Like we used to say, just hook them and put them in jail, get rid of them. We don't do that, though. We take care of our people. So CIT is really much more about the whole service. So how do we serve our citizens the best way possible?
And probably, obviously, teaching the officers how to observe different human traits and figuring out if it's chemical or if it's biological or there's some other issues going on, correct? I mean, that's what the whole course is about, right?
So how does this process work? I mean, is this a result of a 911 call? Is this a result of someone calling some other number, non-emergency number, asking for assistance? Is this an officer finding somebody on the street? Is it all of the above?
It could certainly be all of the above. And, as we looked historically, we realized that a lot of the calls that we go on, there's some kind of a nexus to a mental illness. And like Dan was saying, oftentimes there would be, the officer would show up and try and see if there was a crime that was committed and take him to jail to try and fix the problem for the night or make the situation calm for the night. And now we try and train the officers on different techniques, give them different social services in the area to reach out to and try and fix the problem long term instead of just putting a Band-Aid on it and for the night. And so that'll help that family, it'll help the individual, and hopefully it can help impact us by reducing calls for service. A lot of times we have repeat calls at the same address, and so instead of putting a Band-Aid on it, we want to try and work with the family to see if we can actually impact and make a difference to truly help.
And so are we seeing an increase in the need for officers and psychologists to be trained in this field? Is there seem to be like more so than the past, we need to have these skill sets that we've not necessarily paid attention to in the past?
Yes.
And why is that? Is there something going on that's creating more issues for our folks?
I think you see it nationally, that oftentimes you will see the 911 call is made by a mom because she has a child that's out of control, whether the child is 18 or 45 in some cases, and you will see that the news story would be they will interview the mom, and the mom says, I called the police to help my son, and this happened, and it ended up not being so positive of an outcome with the police. So we wanted to take a step back, see if we can give our officers some better training and see how they can maybe de-escalate situations. It's not always possible, but whenever we can, and give them some different things to think about as they're responding to these calls. If a parent calls and says, I have a brother or a spouse or a daughter that has bipolar disorder, and he or she is out of control, I need some help. They can now, as they're responding to the call, think back through their training. Okay, I have some additional training on bipolar, that this is what it means. This is maybe how I can help once I get there.
So you're saying some of the symptoms and some of the signs of that particular bipolar personality, right. And so that gives the officer some tools to try to address it and maybe get crisis involved so that we can move it forward and have a solution to the problem.
If we can get it stabilized and then call in our professionals, which is Natalie and her team, that's where the help really starts, and we can really start to process through what the problem is and how can we help solve it.
If I could add to that, though, the other piece to that is that when mental health services or agencies their funds dry up, then law enforcement becomes the first source that has contact with these folks in a crisis situation. And it's really, an officer's not trained for the mental health piece, they're trained to keep the peace and keep the order. So we have a need that has come to law enforcement by the lack of services that are out there in the community. At the same time, we're training our officers so that they're better equipped to deal with these. Okay.
What can we do for our parents that don't want to, or hopefully don't have to wait till there's crisis and they have to dial 911? Are there any services out there that we offer in terms of a conduit to get services? Isn't that what PCIS has been doing for years?
Right, and so in Scottsdale, not only does the Civilian Crisis Unit, which I belong to, but also the officer CIT, we're kind of duplicating efforts, but it's coming from two different directions. Okay. So I would say that about 90% of our referrals are coming straight from the street. And they're from officers who are having contact with families who need assistance at the moment, and so they're referring at the time. So they're not only giving their best effort there, but they're also referring to our unit.
But again, for parents that are out there that know there's something that they want to address and don't want to wait for crisis, is there some place they can go for that help that we can recommend that they reach out to?
I would say, and Dan can probably speak to this from a former school resource officer, is when the child goes to school, whether they get referred to the SRO by a teacher, or maybe the school psychologist or an administrator that sees the child is acting out in some way, and they will come because they don't know where to turn. They'll go to the SRO, and I'm sure Dan has numerous stories of students that he has been that conduit and started the process.
That's usually when you see problems begin, is when a child goes to school. The first time they're in a social setting a lot of times. So the parents, they'll see a difference in the child, and of course the teachers will see differences and things. So that's usually, even kindergarten could be that very first time that you see an issue to address.
And I think that's the point I want to make clear for our viewers, is that because we have parents and grandparents watching, and they don't have to wait till it get to be a crisis before they can get help. That there's plenty of places, and we're even willing to be there as well as one of those conduits to assistance. And we're again, talking to the SROs or talking to the people at the school that provide those services, as opposed to waiting until we got to call 911. There's someone in danger, either they themselves or us as family members or the community, before we call the police and then get the help. And so I don't want parents to think, okay, this is just, and this is about what we do when we're called.
Right,
but
it's reactive.
But don't wait for us if you can see that change.
Correct.
Because we prefer keeping people out of our system. But the good news is, if people come into our system, we're prepared to deal with it by training our officers appropriately, having professionals available to us, and having resources outside of our organization to refer people to. And I think that's the point I wanted to get across, and thank you for helping me do that.
I guess one of the things that I would like to say to our viewers too, though, if you have a child that's having issues, obviously with the social media the way it is and the pressures that there are, the substantive abuses, things that are happening, knowing who your kid or your child is friends with. And there's a lot of things that parents can do to, diagnose such an issue. And sometimes it's good to just unplug these kids from this whole system. And I'm sure as a school resource officer, Dan, you have seen, the tremendous difference in some of the school bullying and stuff online and just all this, the pressure and the social media. So I'm sure parents are seeing warning signs.
Oh, definitely. You're seeing it earlier and earlier too. What you used to see in high school, the bullying kind of things, we're seeing more middle school, elementary already. So those signs, they come up quick. And a lot of times it is interesting that children, when they start developing those issues, they get involved with the school system. Parents can also, they can always ask for an evaluation. They think their child has special needs of some sort, and the schools are bound to do that. And our school system is great about doing that. I was a former teacher in our city, so I know how that system works. Then get a child into a special education curriculum or something where they're getting those immediate services in school is fantastic. But one thing that I would like to share, and Natalie, I speak at a lot of town halls and things, is that when it does get to that point of crisis, a lot of times parents don't know what to do, so they just call the police. Well, I like to remind our viewers that when we show up, our job is to take control of the situation, make sure everybody's safe. So they may think that we're just going to come in and talk and make things nice and easy, but there's certain times we may be very directive, telling people to sit down there and you sit there. Not that we're trying to be mean, but we need to know what's going on first. So if somebody calls 911, understand they're saying that we're in crisis, we need help. So we're going to come in and take control of that. But what's great about the CIT training is that you have officers that are already trained in understanding, recognizing things. A parent might say, my son is bipolar, let's use the example you used, sir. We already kind of thinking about, well, I know some of the signs and symptoms, I maybe know some good communication skills to work with this kind of person. So you're showing up already preloaded how to help instead of just being directive. So
just additional skills.
Exactly right. It's a good system.
Information is so much power, right? And I mean, your agency and what you always teach us is from leadership is that the more information you have, the more information, the better trained the officers are, the better service we give to our citizens. I mean, that just comes from the top.
And we want our people to be approachable, and we want our folks to be well trained, and I think that this is just one example of how we create that atmosphere amongst all of our personnel, and all that they do is that, hey, we're a resource, we're there to help, we are there to make sure people are safe, and sometimes that requires us to be in control, but for the most part we're trying to get them the assistance they need so they can have, they can be safe and they can have very productive lives and fruitful lives. And so this training that is relatively new.
CIT training's been around for a long time,
but this next step in what we're doing and spreading it out a little bit and doing a larger scale, that was the next step. Okay. And so where are we now? Because I know we've recently started this program in conjunction with Arizona Post, which is Arizona Officer Training and Standards. And so where are we at with that training?
With the help of Natalie and PCIS, they kind of took charge, and we started seeing a need to train more officers in this. And how can we best do that? So we believe in partnerships and collaborating. So we reached out to our East Valley agency partners, Mesa, Chandler, and Gilbert, and us, and we came together with some leadership and decided we need to get more officers trained. How do we best do this? So we decided to all partner, pool our resources, and host 4 trainings a year instead of 1 or 2, and we'll be able to get more of our officers and hopefully some of our civilian staff also through this type of training. So our goal is to train 100 officers a year in this, and these are patrol officers, the officers that are handling the 911 calls, not detectives behind a desk or supervisors. These are the
uniformed officers.
That's right.
First responders.
The first responders that are answering the calls, to get 100 per year trained. And so we had our first training a few weeks ago, and it was a huge success, and we hosted it, and then our partners are going to host the trainings throughout the rest of the year.
Okay. Now this is more than just say bipolar issues or teen issues. Y'all do stuff with Alzheimer's and things, correct?
It's a 40-hour training that involves a variety of issues having to do with mental illness, developmental disabilities, and we also included Alzheimer's, dementia-related issues, which is unique. Phoenix and Tempe PD have put on a CIT program for years, and they've been very successful. Part of the reason that we broke off, as the LT mentioned, is because we were only able to get a couple seats every class. So this way we're able to put a lot of our folks through, because it was our understanding that we wanted to put a lot of CIT officers through the training.
And how does it work if I call 911 and the officers that shows up isn't trained in this, and it would benefit us to have a CIT officer? How would that work?
Sure. All of our officers that are trained in CIT, our dispatchers have a list of them. And so as they're dispatching a call that they think could utilize a CIT officer, they can attach that officer to the call. And all of our sergeants and lieutenants have been trained in understanding what a CIT officer can do. So as they're hearing the calls for service come out, if they think a CIT officer can be utilized, they can ask for one to be assigned to the call. And if a beat officer shows up and he or she is not CIT trained but sees the need, then they know what the program's about and they can call one too.
And like, if I remember when I've been on the street and long time ago, we would call PCIS if we needed something and they would show up.
They're always our go-to.
Exactly.
When you don't know who to call, we call PCIS.
So I mean, and you guys always show up. So I mean, before CIT and everything, I mean, we've always had a way to address this.
Right.
And like you said, Chief, 40 years of innovative.
The big difference here is that how many folks are at PCIS?
Well,
how many do you have?
We're slated to have 7. We're down 1, so
you have 6.
We have 6
now
right
you're talking
now.
about 100 officers trained, spread across the city. There should always be at least a CIT person available at that time, because sometimes you all happen to be off and unavailable and you have to respond from home. And so the beauty of this program is at least you have somebody there that has some additional skill sets that can hold the fort and perhaps even resolve the issue before the few folks that are PCIS are available to respond. And I suspect you don't really know what time of day these things are going to happen, and I suspect a lot of this happens after dark.
And I also suspect that a lot of the CIT people also still call PCIS just to check in with them, make sure they did it right. just saying, not that they're not qualified, but I think they're like, I think we better run this through Natalie or Tracy or somebody. Isn't that the truth?
You don't get much sleep then, do you?
Oh, well, we are busy, but we have a job. I love that. Viewers can actually, when they call 911, ask for a CIT officer, and if there is one that's on the schedule that evening or that day, they can be dispatched.
Oh, okay.
We've worked that arrangement out. Actually, the lieutenant was very helpful in that.
Outstanding.
We sat down last summer and looked at our overall coverage throughout the city. And the model we follow is the Memphis model of CIT. And the idea is having at least 20% of your officers on the road at one time being CIT qualified. And we're pretty close to that right now. We're going to be much better soon.
And the Memphis model has been out for a long time.
1987.
Yeah, 1987. So it's a model that many of us are familiar with.
Yes.
And so that really hasn't changed much.
So we sat down and looked at, okay, where's our coverage throughout the 24-hour day period? And Lieutenant Martin was great about the first people went through our school, filled some of those holes we needed. So we're having coverage throughout the 24 hours a day.
Oh, absolutely.
And what's great, you should know, Chief, is a lot of times when a call comes out and you'll hear something on dispatch about a mentally ill person, you'll hear a CIT officer say, I'm CIT, and they'll just self-report. So a lot of our folks are really excited about what they do. They're passionate about it. So they self-report and they go on their own.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So now the issue of they could ask for CIT is really an issue about who knows it exists. And I know there was a wonderful article in the paper recently about CIT, but is there some some desire to market a little bit about who we are in terms of what we offer?
Okay.
What is that?
That's a good question.
I only ask good questions now. It's my show.
Well, families that have a person with mental illness in their family oftentimes are aware of other organizations here in town like NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and through the case managers or through the psychiatrist or things like that, they are aware of this crisis intervention team training for officers. So they're telling families, and so families are aware of it. It's not every city in Maricopa County, though, that has a CIT program. They kind of dabble here and there, and obviously the 3 that we've joined want to increase the number of CIT officers on their staff. But in Scottsdale, our dispatchers know we have plenty to offer up. There shouldn't be a squad that doesn't have somebody on or access to. So that's really good news.
It's great news, it really is.
Well, I think this is a lot of information, and maybe we can even have some of the crime prevention officers put it out into their newsletters. And you know what, do we ever do like training for like our public?
We haven't, but one thing we have talked about doing, and Dan touched on it earlier, is the more we can reach out, and we're starting to reach out to the medical professionals that deal with these families, to try and start training the families, like Dan said, what happens when that family calls 911. A lot of times they don't understand what the response is going to be. So we're starting to try and train medical professionals to let the families know, hey, if you have a crisis at your home and you dial 911, this is what's going to happen, just so you're aware, because it's just a lack of awareness.
So that is great, because when you get into that situation, people are very emotional. And if they have some idea what's going to happen, you can at least deal with some of that emotion or fear of the unknown. So that's an excellent idea. I think that's great. We want to thank you guys for being our guests.
Great
It's been our pleasure.
Thank you. Doing some amazing stuff. Now, again, I'm so thrilled to have a department that has an organization, or has a community that was sharp enough to create PCIS 40 years ago, way ahead of its time, and included in the police department. So I'm always bragging about you guys, and I'm very, very proud of your accomplishments, and thank you for your support in this program. Thank you all. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you
all. So I tell you, this is a kind of a sad moment.
Fast.
No, it's a sad moment. I think we have some sad news to reveal about something that's going to happen that's going to be a big change. And so I think I'm announcing my retirement. This set is going away.
We are going to have a new set.
We're going to have a new set. I'm going to miss the blue curtain.
We're going to look like Fox News.
I'm going to miss the
Channel
blue curtain. Maybe I can get a cup of coffee. But anyway, the point is behind the desk. But we are looking forward.
Tea like Wendy. I want to have tea like Wendy Williams.
Okay, so as long as you're not Judge Judy. But anyway, that's beside the point. So I don't know what it's going to look like. We've seen pictures.
I know.
We're looking forward to it. Say goodbye to the blue curtain.
Yeah, no more of these things so we can fit in the
chairs. Might want to tape this one so you can have it for memory's sake, but we'll be in a new set, and we're looking forward to seeing you guys next month. Okay. Thank you so much for your support, and we'll have it be safe. Take care.
See ya.